Welcome back to the Pin Tumbler Basement. Today we're talking about lock-picking terms. And we start by talking about one of the components of a lock, and that is the Bible. Looks like this, and it looks like this in many other shapes, but it is basically what contains springs and driver pins and key pins and the core. Inside the Bible, we find the lock core. The lock core has the keyway, that's where the key goes. It has holes for your key pins, and it has some sort of way of attaching a tailpiece or an actuator on the back. And that's about it. Lock-picking tools. For single pin picking, we have a hook. This is one hook. They come in many variants, but they are basically used to manipulate pins inside the lock. They're used to manipulate pins inside the lock, and you manipulate one pin at a time. And that is how you single pin pick a lock. Moving on from that, we have something called a rake, the most popular one being this one. This is from Sparrows. It's called a triple peak. It's also called a Bogota, and it comes from many different manufacturers. What this does is, instead of when we single pin pick, we manipulate one and one pin. This one manipulates lots of pins at the same time, trying to set them all quicker. If you're into competition and speed picking and stuff like that, this is probably one of the tools you're going to want to have. They also come in many variants. I brought some. The top one here is called a city rake, which I don't understand because it doesn't look like a city. It looks more like a mountain range to me, but okay. Universally named a city rake. And then you have something like this, which is a double peak, I guess, but this is also a rake to manipulate several pins at once. Then you come to tension wrenches, which is what we use to tension the core when we pick them or rake them. This is one variant called a Z wrench, and you also have the classic pry bar. Comes in various thicknesses, and the thickness is this way. Next piece of equipment, followers. We use these to dismantle locks. When you have, in the Bible, you have springs and driver pins, and then you have the core sitting inside there. And if you want to dismantle this without everything shooting everywhere, you need a follower that basically goes into the Bible of the lock, and you use it to push the core out. At the same time, the follower stays inside the Bible to keep the driver pins and the springs where they belong. Next up is driver pins. These are spring-loaded and they sit inside the holes of the Bible. They are spring-loaded, like I said, and they push on the key pins. There are many variants to driver pins. Here is a variation which has serrations on it. We'll have a look at how that works in a little while. Here's another version which is basically, I think this is called a trampoline pin or a barrel pin. Here's another variation of the driver pins. This one is, don't know if this one has a name, but it has sort of cutouts, so you have varying feedback as you try to push it back up into the Bible to unlock the core. When you get into challenge locks and stuff, you have more exotic pins like this guy. You can buy these or you can make them yourself, and these are mainly used in challenge locks to challenge other lock pickers. I don't think you will find many commercial available locks with pins like these in them because they do, they can hinder longevity of the lock. And we have a key, and we have something called key bidding, which is the cutouts here. And these correspond to the pins within the core, the key pins within the core. So closest to you when you're trying to pick a lock is this pin here, and he is cut quite low. And pin number 2 here is cut even lower. So when you're trying to pick these two guys that are in here, you have to avoid hitting the two low cuts. That's why we're talking about high, low, high, low. You see, if I were to use this pick and try and pick this lock with this bidding, I would have a problem here because I need to go up there at least to push the key pin up to there. And that might overset one of these guys here. So that is what we mean when we are talking about the bidding. Let's take this Bible and insert a driver pin and a spring in position number 1, and you can see how we do that. For this process we have to use a follower to keep everything in place after we're done. You're gonna need a set of tweezers, which are these guys. These are from Sparrows and they are made to pick up pins and springs and stuff. So if I can find a spring here, we can start. So I start by putting the spring into the Bible, and he just falls down inside there. And then I take a key pin, After the spring is in place, I will take a driver pin. And the way to do this, the way that I've studied and learned on YouTube how you do this, is you insert your follower into the Bible. Make sure not to destroy the spring there. And you take your driver pin and just use it to push the spring into the hole. And then you push the follower against. You see that? I'm pushing the follower now against the little pin, holding him in place, and then use your tweezers and push him down. So now we have a spring-loaded driver pin in here with the spring below him, and now we need to insert the core. Before we do that, however, we have to make sure we are building a lock that works. So the first position here is where we loaded our Bible with a pin. That will be this position here. Now we need to insert the key into the core, if we can. And then we need to find a key pin that fits in there, rests on the key, and is absolutely flush with that hole. Should not be below the hole and should definitely not be above the hole. So let's just try some here. He is also too small. Finally, I found one that fits. So this should make the lock, our build here, our one pin lock, work as it's supposed to. So what we do now is make sure we put the core up against the follower and just push him through. When I now rotate this lock so that it's upside down now, but it goes to the locked position, and remove the key, which is a little bit tricky, obviously. So now we've made a one pin lock using a Bible, a spring, a driver pin, a key pin, and a core. We have a key with bidding that fits, so we can unlock the lock, and it works. And it's a little hard to get out again because I used the wrong key pin, but the lock works. Now, we used standard pins for this. That means this core can rotate a little bit, but not much. That's because standard pins are smooth-sided and doesn't give a lot of play. So single pin picking is standard pin lock, involves tensioning the lock, and now we are applying pressure to the driver pin located in the shear line here. So when we push up on key pin, the first pin in this lock, which is the only pin in this lock, and we get him to the shear line between the core and the Bible, the lock opens and you get a little click. Let's lock him back up. So we use a hook, or in this case a ball. I don't know what this is called, but I use it as a hook, so deal with it. Press up on the pin to reach the shear line and the lock is open. Let's do that again. This time I've loaded the lock with a spool pin. And as you can immediately see, now there's a lot more wiggle room for this core to move about in the Bible. That's because the spool pin located in the shear line between the Bible and the core can turn because it has cutouts on it. So when we apply tension to this lock now, going clockwise, and I start pushing up on pin number 1, which is the first key pin, thereby pushing up on the spool pin, I'm going to get what we call counter rotation. This is because the spool needs to align, it needs to go straight into the Bible, it can't go sideways into the Bible. So when I push up, you're going to see the tension wrench going counterclockwise. And when we reach the shear line, the lock opens. Let's do that again. We apply tension clockwise. When I push up, I immediately know that this is the spool pin because the lock starts turning the other way. And that's what we call counter rotation. You can see the tension wrench moving the other way there. And when it reaches the shear line, the lock opens. This time in the core, I have loaded it with one serrated pin. Because of the serrations on the pin, these give us what we call a crunchy lock, and that is because each of the little serrations has to get stuck in the key in the shear line, and you have to push it up and you get a little click like that. And when you have gotten enough clicks so you reach the shear line, the lock will open. See if you can hear this. Hear the clicking? Serrated pins makes the lock what we call crunchy. It's like there's sand in it. So if you have lots of serrated pins in here, everything is going to click, and you need to be careful. Just give each pin one click at a time because it's very easy to overset. Overset basically means you have pushed the key pin, which is located here in the core. You have pushed that up past the shear line and into the Bible, effectively locking the core up. It can't move. So if you set it over the limit where it's supposed to be, that is what we call an overset. So that's it, guys. That's what I had for you today. Make sure you subscribe, make sure you click the notification bell to get notified when I upload videos, and I will see you later. Bye.